Alright, greets peeps, we are back with our no DLC Stellaris tutorial, and we're now looking at the populations tab of the planet view. The populations tab shows us the three tiers of populations that are in the within the game. You have ruler tier population, you have specialist tier population, you have worker tier population. There's actually more tiers than that. You can also have primitives, which don't really fit into any of these, and you can also have slaves, which I guess do fit into the workers area, but they kind of don't as well. Oh, and you can also have criminals, which don't do anything at all, they just create crime. So I guess 5 in total. So we have rulers, specialists, workers, primitives, and criminals. Primitives do create stuff, but I think they only create food. It's very rare that you see them in the game, so it's not really a thing to worry about. The thing you need to worry about is these three, and criminals. Whenever you have criminals, just build more enforcer jobs, and enforcers will get rid of those criminals eventually. I won't go into the mechanics of populations at the moment because it's quite tricky and better examined when we have more planets. But be aware that when you create new high tier jobs, whether they be ruler or specialist jobs, workers will immediately go up a tier and fill those jobs. So don't build a bunch of research buildings immediately, because you will lose your population that is doing important stuff like creating the base tier resources that you need to build the consumer goods which researchers need to do their jobs. So you can cause yourself trouble if you build high tier buildings without enough of a income in the base tier resources. So just be aware of that. In this window anyway, we can scroll over the various populations, the various jobs rather, and see what they produce and what they consume. We can see that our ruler tier guys here create amenities and or provide amenities and produce unity, and that they eat food and they consume consumer goods. We can see that researchers output research and they consume food and consumer goods. We can see that metallurgists output alloys and consume food and consumer goods and minerals. Similar applies for basically all jobs. They will have in fact, all tiers of society have a food and consumer goods requirement or usage, and most jobs will have an upkeep that is involved in their job. So what we saw before with the in the foundry, that metallurgists turn minerals into alloys, or artisans turn minerals into consumer goods. Yes, the base tier dudes working in our districts don't have any material requirements beyond what they themselves as I was going to say as humans, they themselves as tutorions consume their food and their consumer goods. If we click on these buttons here, we can control the number of workers doing a different job to an extent. Let's have a look. No, 644. Yes, so all of these are filled at the moment, so we can't do too much juggling with these. Once it comes to examining population mechanics a little bit more in depth, we'll revisit this, and we'll look at shuffling people around between jobs to make sure we're getting the output of the things that we need on any given planet at any given time. But what we do need to examine is this over here. Where before, on the main window, we were looking... Actually, it's the same on either window. Where before we were looking at there being 0 jobs available and 0 unemployment, in 33 months, we're going to have a new Tutorion build, if you like, or breed or expand, and this population will have no job. So we've got to, or we want to, make sure that in 33 months we have built something on this planet that will allow this Tutorion to actually do something. If he doesn't do something, he's going to produce no resources, but he'll still consume food and consumer goods, because he's a Tutorion, and all Tutorions require food and consumer goods. And because he has no job, he's going to reduce the stability on the planet. It could also cause crime, depending on events, as I understand it. But ideally, what you want to do is you want to have 0 available jobs at all times, because that's the most efficient. You're not paying for the buildings, or you're not eating it into your administrative capacity by having unworked districts. But you want to make sure that as soon as this guy is going to become active, once this population is built, you want to have a building ideally pop that same month, and a building become available for that pop on the same month. It never happens. It's very tricky to juggle to that extent, but it is the ideal if you can do it. We can also see in here that there's 2 other options. Rather than growing, you can also have declining, in which people leave your planet for... they may be migrating to another one of your planets. They may be migrating to another empire with whom you have a free movement treaty. I can't remember the proper term for it, but you can have your people migrate between empires, or you could have non-organic life forms. You can have robots being assembled, so that's why you have an assembling option as well. At the moment, we don't know about robots, so there won't be any of those happening, but they're the same as them. When your robots are assembled, they will need housing, and they will need a job to do. So, as with your organic pops, you want to make sure that once your new population is built or grown, they have a job to do and housing to live in. There's other stuff to be seen in here, but we'll maybe come back to it when we do the advanced population control and population mechanic examination. Next tab is our Armies tab. What we saw earlier on is that our planetary administration provides enforcers which spawn defense armies. Those two armies there are defense armies spawned by our planetary administration's enforcers. And I want to check something. Precinct houses. Yeah. So precinct house would spawn defense armies as well. So defense armies you can't do anything with. They just stay on the planet, and if anyone tries to attack it, they need to fight 92 strength worth of army. It's actually more than that because defensive armies get bonuses. The defender on a planet gets bonuses. So if you were trying to attack this planet, you'd want to bring maybe 160 to make sure you won the fight. There's not too much randomization in it, but different things will affect how different armies work, and you need to bring a stronger army than the garrison on a planet. But make sure you defeat them. Also in this window, we can see assault army strength. When you click recruit, you can spend time and minerals to create assault armies or various other types of armies as your technology increases. And those armies can be embarked, and those transport fleets will become a different type of military fleet that you can fly around and land on other planets. So that's how you build an army. You recruit it in here, and then you embark it once you've finished building them, and then move them to wherever you want to have them go. You can assign generals in here to your defensive armies if one of your planets is about to be attacked. It's not a bad idea, particularly if you think you can win the fight, or you can hold off the attacking army for long enough that you can get your own troops here to support the planet. Putting a general on isn't a bad idea, but typically you'll have a general assigned to an assault army on a transport fleet, and you'll land him and his army on a planet that you want to either attack or defend. Devastation shows the amount of devastation that a planet has taken from being bombed. Other events can also cause devastation, and when you have devastation, it reduces the amount of housing on a planet and the resource output of a planet. The build queue shows you the armies that you're building, and will time through like what we see with all other building types. Oops. And the last tab is the corporate tab, which can't be looked at because we don't have a corporate government type. But if you have a corporate government type, and there's several, and I've played only a handful of them, you can do fancy corporate espionage stuff that gives either bonuses or penalties to how effective trade is and how common crime is on the planet, and you can use that to mess with your opponent's economies or improve your own or your allies' economies. So it's it's an interesting feature, but one that I don't often use. So the last button, which I forgot to... we're going to look at the resettle button later on, when we look at the population mechanics more in depth. But the last option available to us immediately is the decisions button. These are planet-specific orders or practices that can be temporarily enforced by spending some of our resources. Yeah, so we can spend influence to stop creating robots if we've got too many robots on a planet, which can happen. You don't necessarily want all of the population. You may want to stop robot production for certain reasons, which we'll go into later on once we've got them. You can choose an edict, make a decision that spends your influence to stop robots from being produced. You can declare martial law, which will increase your stability and add more soldier jobs. And soldier jobs increase your naval capacity, and they help defend your planet. You can declare population controls where people stop breeding, so you don't get that automatic growth. There's reasons for doing that. Pretty much, well, yeah, some planets you don't want people expanding on. You want to keep them small because they're not particularly good. But usually you only do population control when you've got nowhere to put these new populations, or if you're a government type that doesn't allow resettlement of populations. And I think that maybe, I can't remember whether that's us or not. Huh. No, it's not us. We're allowed to move our population around. We're allowed to bully people around. But once your population gets to basically the holding size of a planet, it's kind of tempting to declare population controls. It will lower your stability and push people towards immigration, but it stops people from continuing to breed on your planet and having no job and lowering stability and causing unrest and causing crime and a whole bunch of stuff. So population controls can be important later on in the game. You may want to increase your amenities by throwing a bunch of luxury goods at the population to keep them cheerful for 10 years. Also to increase the immigration pool, potentially. You can expel the excess population if you've got too many people on a planet. You can spend some of your influence to kick them out, but it does lower your stab for 5 years. And you can send artifacts to museums to boost culture worker output. I've never yet done that. These are a very hard to come by resource. In fact, we haven't seen this resource mentioned yet. Artifacts are a very hard to come by resource that you get from investigating ancient ruins, from doing archaeology, and in certain mods, I think that's a mod feature, it may be part of the core game, you can also produce artifacts in some very rare circumstances late on in the game. But yes, to boost culture worker output by 20%, spending these things that are extremely rare. I've never yet used it. I cannot see how you'd ever use it. It's very strange. But there are other types of decisions that can be taken in the game as well. Lots of different techs will give you lots of different options. And so decisions can be very important depending on what's happening on a planet at a given time. But we'll wrap this one up here. That's the planet side of things for the moment. As I say, we will need to go into them deeper once we're able to, once we have a few more planets and a few more populations to work with and move around. So we'll examine those in more depth later on. We'll also examine buildings a little bit further in the future. Once all of these buildings that we can see here can be upgraded. So upgrading buildings and different building types, advanced building types, are quite important for us. So once we've done the time skip, we'll come back and have a look at that one as well. But thank you for joining us here. We'll be back on the next one, and we'll be looking at how exploring and how the research, not research assignments, how the anomalies research and special projects work. So we'll see you on that one very soon. Cheers, guys.